Okay, guys, Kayla here, jumping on to record with our second guest for this segment. We are doing our guest host portion on depression, and I have Karlee here with me today, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here.
Hi, guys. I'm Karlee. Kayla and I have known each other for a very long time, and I'm super honored that she asked and super excited to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. I'm actually glad that I grew the balls to be like, no, you know people who have experiences. Put your ass on the line here and do it.
Absolutely. It's so great to be asked, and it's so great to share, and it's so great to be part of the conversation.
It's freaky though, because you know it is. It's a touchy thing, and I just like was like, oh, I know I'm okay bearing my entire soul about how my depression rocked my life, but I'm like, I don't know where other people are at. So I was like, you know what? Part of the journey is just asking,
Oh,
and I'm stoked.
absolutely. Part of it is the stigma, you know what I mean? And understanding that vulnerability is something that people are still not very comfortable with, but it's growing. I can see it. I see people are ready for it. So this is fantastic.
It's like part of the human experience being vulnerable. I like what I think
Yes.
it's amazing once you move past the fear that's tied to it.
Yes, it's so amazing to have somebody like genuinely like look you in the eye and say, "Oh my God, me too."
Yeah. Oh, see, and like I'm like I don't know. I don't care. But I'm not one of those. I don't really know what the Me Too movement is. Nobody like hex me or anything. I'm sorry. I just like there's so many things that happen on the daily that it's hard to keep up with everything. I feel like I have a vague idea, but like every time I hear that, I'm like, is that like I'm worried that people are gonna tie it to that or whatever. And it's like,
Oh,
no, let it go. Like the Me
yeah.
Too, like we can all be going through something and talk about it. It's okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just having some hearing this, this podcast, having people just listen if they and hear something that they relate to and understand and are like, oh, okay. And it doesn't change it, it doesn't eradicate that for them, but it does let them know that man, this isn't as big as and scary as it was 2 seconds ago. Now that I know that someone else understands.
That you're not alone. And I think that's the most beautiful part about it. And I'm stoked that you said that. I'm glad that that's how you feel about it. And I think with that, we're going to go into our questions.
Great.
So clearly, I have you here. So I think most people will know the answer. But have you ever been diagnosed with depression?
I have. So my formal diagnosis came in March of 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, the diagnosis was bipolar type 2. Um, there are quite a few variations of that illness, but mine is categorized by periods of intense depression, followed by bouts of mania or
Hmm.
hypomania, I guess, in my case.
Hypomania.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, what, without sounding insensitive, like, what's the hypermania part? Like,
So for me, hypomania is kind of interesting because it starts with me feeling very, very good. I would describe it as
mm,
almost like casually euphoric. Like, you know
okay,
that
that,
feeling
okay.
when I would describe it when you first fall in love with someone and you're like infatuated and I don't know, like a car wreck could happen around you and it wouldn't affect you. You would still be smiling. That kind of thing. It's
Okay.
this feeling of like being able to take on the world after feeling completely defeated by it, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And it's a term I just wanted to ask because it's a term that I haven't heard of and I don't get, I'm going through school and I'm learning a lot and we're just talking about like depression and counseling and how to help people through things and stuff like that and learning about the brain and I'm just obsessed with it. So it's like everything new that I can hear about how other people's journeys are going through with depression, I'm like, I want to know. Like I want to know it all.
Absolutely. And I mean, hypomania is super, and mania itself. So those two things are different. Mania is usually quite a bit more of an intense experience. For me,
Right.
it's mostly something that happens to me is I tend to attach myself to an idea or an experience and just sort of obsess over it. Sleep
Okay.
becomes very, very little. I talk really fast. I spend a lot of money recklessly. Well, for an example, in a hypomanic phase, one time I watched that life saving magic of tidying up. And I
Okay.
I can't explain it. In the middle of it, it felt like an epiphany. That's what I would describe it as. It always feels like a little bit like, oh my God, I've had a life earth shattering revelation. And at the time, I couldn't see that it was out of control. I just thought, this is
Huh.
great. And it wasn't until I had given away pretty much everything except like our bare furniture that I had even been like casually aware that it had been hypomania, if that makes sense. It's sort of hard to
That's
decipher.
terrifying.
Yeah, it like thankfully it's been quite in control of that part for me for a lot of years now, but it is.
Good. Okay.
It's this sort of dangerous line for me between like feeling amazing and feeling like I've just blown my whole life up.
Like, yeah, like you're either, oh, so I'm gonna I can kind of relate it a little bit. I don't have, like I was diagnosed with chronic depression, and I can't quite remember the difference between that and major. Like major is more intense, whereas chronic, I think, just kind of,
Hmm.
it lasts for long periods of time and it can go or come kind of easily.
Right.
And I think that's when I called my therapist, or reached out to a therapist to get help. Um, I had been talking to him, and then I just couldn't stop crying. So I was like, usually it's either really high or really low. I have no in between. I am either up or really down. So like I said, I need something to level me out, because I can't cry anymore.
Totally. That's it's a similar experience for me. That's definitely an element I experience. And it's interesting, like you
Huh.
mentioned, you know, you having major depressive disorder and chronic depression, how all of these things are um, individual and unique, but sort of referred to as one lump of an experience, which, you know,
Yes.
I think I'm kind of glad that people are starting to discuss the nuances in that.
Well, the separation, because they're different. Like, not, you know, not everyone who's having major depression is going to have symptoms that are similar to that of like what your type of depression is,
Yes.
or postpartum depression. Like, how do you know? Like, it's just like, it's so weird when you think the word depression. I think a lot of people think of one thing and they don't actually articulate it to be many things.
Absolutely. And I think we kind of characterize it as, I mean, and of course it can be this, but sort of just this a sad person, a person who is,
Yeah, you're just sad.
whereas people not only overlook that in their loved ones, but in themselves because they think, I'm
Totally.
not displaying the symptoms of as I've come to understand them, and therefore my suffering is not worthy of being looked at. Do you know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people
Yeah.
just kind of assume that these are like character flaws rather than like something that they are experiencing and dealing with, like a chemical imbalance.
Which is exactly what my therapist said was he figured my issue was. And he said, like, I'd been diagnosed, I think it was 2017, but he said that he had reason to believe that I have had depression since I was very young. And he said it's just the systematic sequence of events that
Mm,
happened that, offset the chemicals. Like, it's crazy. It's actually really
yes.
crazy when you get into the science of it, like the brain science of it all. It's fascinating. And I'm like, I'm not saying like, oh, woohoo, we have like brain issues, whatever. Like, I'm not saying it's great, but I'm like, it's kind of fascinating once you start to understand it and learn about it, and like, it stops taking control of your life as much.
Yes. And I think that some people are worried that knowing it and giving it a label is going to make it like something they can't move forward from. But in a way, it's like,
Yes.
oh man, okay, so this is something I've been dealing with and struggling with for a long time. There's help. I don't need to do this anymore.
Yes. I don't have to do it alone. And you can have some people have access to tools. We call them tool belts, where they will give you access to these tools that will help you learn how to rewire your brain. Like, I learned so many freaking things from my therapist that
Hmm.
looking back, I'm like, wow. And the whole time I was like, honestly, the whole time, dude, I think I was like second guessing it. I was like, I would like get in arguments in my head where we would about a conversation him and I had where I'm arguing with him in my head about being wrong, and it's like, why do you think that that was happening? And it's like more times than none it was because I was wrong and I didn't want to admit
Mm,
it. And so it's like crazy how I learned so much but felt like I was fighting him the entire
yes.
time.
Isn't that, it's kind of a mental boxing match. It's these,
Oh,
like the first time, I don't know, I would, this is gross, but like a scab falls off and you've got that fresh layer underneath and the wind hits
oh,
it and you're like, no, that is gross. And it takes like
yep,
almost, you have to let the wind keep hitting it until it's comfortable. And that's kind of how,
right, because it feels
yes,
weird.
therapy is like that. And I
Oh, I love
am
that.
super glad that, like, I don't know, that you can kick it with your therapist and work through things. Because I really feel like trauma, like you mentioned, a series of events offset the chemicals. Like, a lot of it goes back to trauma as well. It's not just brain chemistry, it's not just your experiences, it's a culmination of like who you are as a person and everything you've lived through. And there's a lot to it.
Many different things. Yeah, it's like what is it? Like I'm sure you know that fight or flight, like
Mm,
that mode your body.
yes.
It's like when you're living in survival mode for so long, you don't know how to come out of it. Therefore, when you do come out of it, it's very strange because you've been living like in a heightened sense of awareness for a long time. My therapist, I think he called it hypervigilance.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I'm like, what?
Yes. And once you like process that, you the interesting thing is it's very uncomfortable for a very long time because now you've identified it,
Oh
but
God.
that doesn't necessarily make it easier. It feels very yucky because you're like, okay, here I am. I've identified what's happening to me, but it's going to take a little bit longer to break these patterns and feel comfortable facing it down. It's like definitely hard work, but it's worthy work. And I'm glad that, like, as a collective, we are starting to do it.
Yeah, we need to, man. This is the whole point. Like Brandy and I say it all the time. Like the last year have everyone has been so disconnected and so and forcibly. Like I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. It's been like a forced separation and a forced segregation of people. And it's like we are one race and it's human.
Yeah, I mean it's been drastic. And I mean, for me, I am learning to reach beyond the barriers that I have made for myself to connect with people. I know that I'm always going to um, feel the way I feel politically, but for me, I'm like, this year has taught me a lot about working with what I have to try to connect with people and trying
Yes.
to keep it alive because it is so easy for me as a person experiencing depression to just give in, to just sink into that desperate darkness. It's not even comfortable, it's desperate. It is
Yes. I know that.
it is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm trying to remember that in all of this, like, I have these tools and the differences that I want to make in the world and social justice. I'm still able to do this. I just have to adapt. It's being
Yeah.
adaptable. And I feel like for as much as we've struggled this year, like you've started this podcast, that is, I think, our what is amazing about us as a species.
Yeah, it's fast. It's like the most fascinating thing to like, you see, and it happens. It's history repeats itself all the time, and it's crazy that we're going through this in our lifetime. And imagine when we're in our 70s, 80s, if there's, if by any chance if that happens again, or if it's another couple of like, more than a few years that pass then, and then something else happens. It's just crazy to think of like our grandparents going through everything they went through to now
Yes.
and being in this time is like we need to do better, all
Mm-hmm.
of
And I
us.
think,
We need to connect.
yes, and I think about, the pandemic we experienced, where like an entire generation of, queer people we lost, and how it was so lonely.
Yes.
And I am hoping that moving forward, we are able to better like care for and connect with people who are suffering, no matter which dynamic it comes from in something like this.
No, and it needs to be, and that's like the funniest thing too. Brandy was just saying like there's actually a lot of platforms, social platforms that you can like that have support groups, which I think is amazing. And yeah, no, I think that's awesome. So we kind of where are we? I
We've
think we're
totally.
like nope, we're not going to get lost. We're not going to get lost, guys. Just kidding. So we've kind of touched on yeah, like we now we know that you
Yes.
have been diagnosed. We know what your diagnosis. And so I remember you said when you were diagnosed, let's talk about how it affected you then to now, homework,
Oh my
relationships,
goodness.
etc.
So, I it's affected every part of my life. I feel like there's always part of me that wants to, really put in the inspo porn, you know what I mean? Like, this is how I overcame it. This is how
Oh
I
yeah.
reached the precipice. But I mean, for me, it's affected everything. I have not held full-time employment since 2013. I left my last job during an episode. It was the first one that I had ever had, and I was not
Ooh,
sure
scary.
what I was experiencing. Um, Things like being on time, meeting deadlines, things like that became absolutely excruciating for me. So yeah, like I said, I have not held full time employment since then. It's something I'm working to change now. um, so my marriage obviously suffered for a few years as well. I mean, we got married the same year I was diagnosed, and it was in a whirlwind adventure of medications and cycles and ups and downs. And
I
it
couldn't, yeah.
was not like the blissful newlywed experience that I think a lot of people, I don't know if they actually have it, but a lot of people aspire to. I'm grateful for every second. We've grown a lot together, but it was hard. Friendships suffered. I think it was very hard for people to see me not only suffer, but some of the symptoms of mental illness will have you acting very foolish in my case.
Oh yeah, no, dude, it's oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like, and I just when we're talking about this, as we're talking about it over this episode, I'm just like, I'm remembering times when we were younger, and it's just like I just wish that you would have had like more like knowledge
Yes.
sooner, like that someone would have been able to help you sooner and tell you sooner. Like it that's what's frustrating about it for because a lot of us, we all, our whole grad year, like our whole grad class, we went through a lot of
Yes.
shit. So did the kids before, like the year older than us, and then the year, like in the grade 12. So if we were in grade 10, 10, 11, and 12, or when we were, even when we were in grade 9, man, I remember things just started like going south there. And it's like, I wish that we would have had better equipment
Yes.
from like outside source. Like we, we had access to school counselors and stuff, and like they were there, and I remember them being quite helpful. But like on the level of like
Mm,
life shit, like I wish that we would have had life coach counselors coming in, like talking to us, like in after deaths and stuff, like being like, I don't know, something, and people that came in and talked about like moods and behaviors and things like that. Like we were never educated on any
no.
of this, and it's like no, like it's a friggin' miracle
It
that we're all still
is.
alive.
And I think thankfully we are moving out of this notion that adolescence is a frivolous time where people are going through phases rather than real impactful traumas. These things start young, they start in childhood. And I think whatever you're going through, whatever you're struggling with, deserves the respect that it commands. And I feel like high school is vicious enough without feeling entitled to the things that hurt you, not feeling like you can express them, not
Yes.
feeling safe, not only with like adults, but your other peers, because they're just trying to survive too. And it's cutthroat.
Oh, it's so cutthroat. It's like the most
Yes. And
intense
I
thing.
have so much more compassion for myself then and for other people as well. I mean, there are things that I would change, absolutely. But now going forward, I'm just grateful that, the kids coming up are going to hopefully have more resources. And if not, they feel safer to engage in exactly this kind of conversation.
Me too. That's the hope. Like that's the pipe dream here, where we're all shooting for this one thing, and it's like, yeah, I'm so happy that you're here and you're talking to me about this. And where are we? We are so okay with affecting your life. How is it affecting you now? Like, or how are you doing now? Are you doing better with
Yeah,
it?
so this is like an interesting question, because right now I'm actually experiencing a depressive episode, but um,
Okay.
the interesting thing about it is when I'm in it, it feels like I've always been in it, and I'm never not gonna be in it. And now I'm in a
Okay.
place, and I can tell that this is different from when I was first diagnosed. I'm in a place where I can recognize that. I'm able to step back and
Yes.
see, here I am. This feels shitty. This is what this feels like. This feels like it's never going to be over. But I'm also able to express that and have healthy perspective in my life that says, you know what? I know it feels like that. I know it feels like that. But this is temporary. You are not going to always
Yeah.
feel as shitty as you do right now. And that is a huge accomplishment for me because it was years of just wanting it to be over, thinking I was going to reach a point where that was just going to be it, you know, like,
Yeah.
so.
That's fucking crazy, man. Like I'm proud for you. Like that's a big
Yeah.
thing. And I guess with our next question we'll kind of ask like how you manage it. Are you doing it with medication naturally? Like what is your take on how you're
So for
managing your
me,
depression?
I've discovered that the best thing that works is a combination of therapy and medication. I've kind of figured out over the years that as much as I've tried not to take it, it's just not really an option as far as stability for me. Um, Whereas also
Right.
I was
Okay.
taking medication for a while and just doing that. And there's so much more that needs to be addressed, I think. And so therapy was where I really started hashing this out and noticing behavioral patterns, and not just that, but things that I actually had the ability to change. You know, I feel like too that you just are the way you are and you can't change it and nobody can. And I mean, it's not entirely true. It's your essence is who you are, but you have power over a lot of things in your life, and it I'm grateful to know that now, and that probably wouldn't have happened to me without the combination of therapy and meds.
And see, that's what I love about asking you to come and talk, because I knew that your situation was very different from anything that else that I have witnessed. So it's fascinating that you say that, because that was the same. I was first therapy, and then it was with therapy and medication where I started to learn how to take back control of my life and get the strength in knowing my
Mm.
triggers and how to process them. And like that's huge. That's a huge thing for people that have these kind of like disorders happening for them. It's major for you to take like an ounce of control back gives you so much more confidence in your life, and
Yes,
it's awesome.
absolutely. And I wish that, you know, it's so tough because when we talk about therapy, you know, you can't just like tell someone you need to go get therapy because it is so costly. So I feel like for anybody listening who does not have access to that, I just want to make clear that that's a system failure, and it's
Yeah, it is.
it's absolute bullshit. We need to have more resources. Access matters. It's, you know, when we're talking about mental illness, when we're talking about disability, it's not the disability, it's not the mental illness that's the entire obstacle. It's the limited access and the way that the world at large treats people who are suffering. So that is something we need to change.
Yeah, you literally just hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly how I feel about it. That's exactly why I wanted to be a part of this with Brandy. And that's exactly why I'm in the school that I'm in, because I'm like, I need to get right into the thick of it and figure out the internalness of
Mm-hmm.
the system so I can figure out where I can apply more pressure to make more changes. And it's like coming together and realizing there, that collective
Mm-hmm.
thought. I think, you have it, I have it. there's going to be about probably 4 or 5 other people at this moment who are having the same thoughts. And it's like, that
It
is
is.
huge.
Collaboration is an incredible tool. And that is one thing I feel like, mental illness as an experience gave me was the ability to truly connect and collaborate with people. So that's how I think about it. And I guess in the question of where I am now, I don't hate it. That's where I am, is I'm at peace with it, and that's good enough.
Dude, I love that. I love that
Yeah,
so
it's good.
much. Our next question is kind of like a bleed back, and it's a weird one. Well, I kind of overlapped it a little bit, but do you feel like you had an idea that this was maybe how you were at all before you'd ever been diagnosed, or was your earliest sign when you had your first episode or whenever, like, intervention, I
This is such
guess?
an interesting question, because looking back, I can see instances, as far as like early childhood, just very much
Okay.
struggling with um, rituals, things like that, anxieties, definitely feeling what I would just call a sort of lingering sadness. Um, and I can recall this far back
Yes.
into childhood. So I think that it's maybe not what I know now as bipolar, but definitely something that I've been struggling with for as long as I can remember.
Okay. And I think that that's actually really fascinating because I felt the same way when because I just remember being like periods of time in my childhood where I was like exceptionally sad. Like I would just
Mm,
cry for no reason. And it's like, well, you don't really cry for no
yes.
reason. It's like stored emotion coming out like through your physical. I don't know. It's like,
Yes. And these are things we
it's
know
weird.
now, but like when we were growing up, I don't feel like most of us grew up in families where this was known, It was more like, why are you so emotional? What am I going to do with you?
Yeah.
You have a good
Yeah.
life. What is your damage? You know what I mean? But now I'm just glad to know this, because I went through so much of my life just thinking of these things as character flaws, like I like just
Yeah.
yes,
Something wrong with you.
exactly.
Oh, I hate that for us both because it's like I relate to that. I really do. And then um so we kind of touched this, but I'll ask it anyways. Where you're at in your life with your depression. Is it like are you moving to a place where it's more
Yes,
manageable?
absolutely. So I struggled with like episodes of psychosis and stuff with hypomania, where it was
Yeah.
just completely overwhelming for a few years, while I was cycling with medication and stuff. I think it was 2015, found a medication that works really, really well for as far as like managing my mood. I still struggle with depression, but as far as the hypomania and things like that, those are super well managed now. So I'm in a good place. I'm in a place where I'm
I
ebbing and
love it.
flowing.
I love that. You're just letting it happen. You're just trusting that things will work out. And if they don't, you're kind of like, well, we'll work
Yes, my
around it,
biggest
whatever.
struggle right now is reminding myself that there is no such thing as wasted years. It doesn't matter, when you
Oh,
go
I
back
love
to
that.
school, what you're producing. Your worth is not intrinsically tied to what you produce in
Yes.
this world. And even if you spent years on
No.
your sofa, that is still lived experience. You may have missed out on other things, but you were surviving, and that is a badge all its own.
100%. And that really carries us into the next one. So we're we're in the place where you have gotten a few pretty staple things under control, and you did this through therapy and medication. Is there anything else that you want to like say about how you've gotten here? Like how, like, you know, for me, I'm just gonna kind of just throw this in there. For me, it's like I found it was like a
Mm.
spiritual thing when this started really getting the greatest understanding of it.
For
And
me, I guess my unique experience was thinking that I was the worst for so long. And my biggest advice to
okay,
anybody who struggles with this is like, you know what? Let people love you. If if they do, if they say it,
yeah,
if they say you're beautiful, believe them. If they say that you make their life better, believe them. You deserve to accept compliments. You deserve to take up space. That's let people love you, let people see you, and understand that like rejection a lot of times doesn't have shit to do with us. It's healthy. It
exactly.
happens to everyone, and you're worth loving wherever you are in your journey. Yeah.
I love it. Yes. So, what would you say some of your best accomplishments have been in life since you've understood what was
Oh my
happening
goodness.
and how you
Okay.
felt?
So I would just say, like, as a person, I am so much kinder, so much more compassionate. I have so much more empathy for things that I didn't even consider before. I am an incredibly soft person now, which I am proud of. I'm really proud of the relationships I've managed to build and maintain. I think it's really cool. I've met so many people. It was an accomplishment to be vulnerable. I guess like tangible
Yeah.
things. I moved to a new country and I learned the language and met people from scratch and built relationships. And it was something that if you had asked me in 2011, if you had told me that I would be there, I would have thought you were absolutely insane. So that, and I guess my big thing now is that, like, dude, I fucking love plants. Like, so much. I kind of know
Oh,
what I want to
yeah.
do with my life, and I don't know exactly what. It's planty, but that's exciting.
I love it. Purpose, man. That's what we're talking about. And it's like, it's crazy when you come to this point where you're just like, no, I want to do like something that just like fuels me.
Yes.
And it takes a couple bumps and scrapes along the way, but it's really beautiful once you get there. And I love that. I love that. I loved watching you in
Yes, I
Colombia.
was.
Were you in Colombia? Loved it. Every second of it. I was like, that is the most fierce thing you could do because I knew what you were going through mentally. I knew, and I was like, what a boss bitch. Like, let's just pack up and move to Colombia. And then you went
I
through the pandemic
did.
over
I
there.
guess
Like,
they're
these are no
not.
small
And
feats.
that is what I hope. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any like miracle advice or any kind of happy ending because it's not the end. That's just what I want people to know is it's not the end and your path, whatever it looks like, is still a path and it's going somewhere. So like make sure you're around to see it.
Man, this is the coolest conversation. With this is our final one. Like anything at all that we missed that you want to share with our audience about this journey with depression and how it's like with your life?
Man, I think we like covered it all of it and more. I guess just if you can find one safe person in your life, or whether that you don't
Yes.
have to know them, if it's this podcast, if it's anything, a safe person that can listen to you is worth gold. And if you can find that, and you can, whether it's the internet, whether it's support groups, these things are out there and we are here. There are people like Kayla and Brandy and I everywhere waiting to connect. So don't wait, don't suffer alone.
Oh man, I love that. This has been the coolest thing talking to you and having this experience. I'm really excited that we got together, and I really just want to say thank
Thank
you for coming out and
you.
getting real with me. I can't stress enough how important this was for me and Brandy, how much I loved
Oh, I'm
hearing your story.
so honored that you asked, and this was cool. It wasn't nerve-wracking at all. This felt more like shooting the shit than any kind of formal stuffy thing. So for anybody who's thinking about coming on and sharing, you should definitely do it.
Yeah, I mean, we love you guys. We love having all the content that we get from you. We love the conversations. And I feel like every time we do an episode and we connect with people, because we've connected with people we don't know, but I'm also finding the connections with the people I do know after hearing their side of the story is
It's
like,
so
it's like liberating.
amazing that you can have an experience with someone and they're having a total like parallel experience beyond that. And when they finally choose to share it with you, it's like, yes,
Whoa.
exactly.
Whoa
Well,
is
dude, I'm
me. Yeah.
so excited that we got to talk. This was so amazing. So thank you so much.
All right. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic back over to my girl Brandy for our last guest.